A recurring theme has developed the past couple of weeks regarding polar opposite views on women's issues and, in turn, women themselves. On one hand, House Republicans continue acting on bills to support females just as the vast majority wants. Meanwhile, House Democrats time and again oppose bills to support women in a way that effectively denies their existence. For instance, consider how a House committee hearing unfolded for a bill, House File 435, banning biological males from being housed in the state's only female prison in Shakopee. This is an effort to clean up current state law, which states the Shakopee facility must house, quote, persons committed to the Commissioner of Corrections by the courts of this state, unquote. The House Republican bill simply replaces the word persons with only biological females, because female inmates deserve the safety and privacy they need to recover and gain the skills necessary to re-enter society. But out there on the fringe, the ever out-of-touch House Democrats not only opposed this bill in the hearing, but they doubled down on the premise that we can't discern the difference between a man or a woman by looking at them.
But what it makes me think about then is the earlier reaction to the earlier question, right? Which kind of, I think, gets to the broader point here, which is that we can kind of look at somebody and make some determination about them, or fail to be resistant to make some judgment about them, and just have it be that we're sort of making these blanket statements about people and putting them in boxes. And what I think it's interesting, actually the definition that was added in the amendment, the number of us voted against, but it actually does kind of point up the technicalities of this and the fact that you can't look at somebody, nor should you be able to look at somebody and say, oh, this is that kind of person and that kind of person. In fact, it's a lot more complicated than that.
It's a lot more complicated than that, one Democrat said, which comes as a wild surprise to literally every doctor or midwife who has declared on site, it's a boy. The upshot is House Democrats want to keep putting men in the Shakopee Women's Prison. They say it's for their safety. But as my line of questioning with Commissioner Schnell during the bill hearing reveals, this is not actually about safety at all.
Commissioner Schnell, when you were describing earlier the process through which any inmate who identifies as trans requests to be transferred from a male facility to Shakopee, it stuck out that you referenced taking into consideration how they feel about their safety. Was that an accurate description?
Commissioner Snow.
Mr. Chair, yes, their view on their own safety has to be given consideration.
Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Schnell. So let me ask a hypothetical that I think I know the answer to, but I'd like to get it on the record. So let's say there's a male incarcerated person in a male correctional facility who, for whatever reason, feels as though he is not safe in that environment. Perhaps there's a history of incidents to substantiate a lack of safety, and feels as though he would be safer if transferred to Shakopee. Is there a path to make that happen?
Commissioner Snow.
Mr. Chair, no, that would not be. There are other management tools we would use in that case.
Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Schnell. That's interesting. So it would seem as though that what hinges on this decision of whether or not we're going to even consider transferring an incarcerated person from one facility, from a male correctional facility to Shakopee, is not actually their safety or the likelihood of them having issues in that area, but rather their claim to a particular gender identity. If they don't have that claim, then no matter what safety concerns exist for any other reason, there is no mechanism for them to be transferred to Shakopee. It's also interesting because it suggests that there are other ways of mitigating safety concerns that don't involve transferring incarcerated people from a male facility to the female's facility at Shakopee. Could you expound upon what some of those contingencies are?
Commissioner Snow.
Mr. Chair, Representative Hudson, I think one of the things I want to be clear is that the view of that individual's safety is one of 9 factors. And so we're talking about a comprehensive range of factors that are considered, number one. Number two, remember, being transgendered speaks to the fact that these are, we are talking about how do we deliver gender responsive care. And again, when we look at this through the lens of what the American Medical Association, how it regards gender dysphoria, as we look at this through kind of all of the WPATH considerations around the care and the provision of services to transgendered people. These are the things that inform our policy. And I think we're talking about something fundamentally different when we're talking about, we have one women's facility in the state of Minnesota. We have 10 other male facilities that we can manage populations in a whole variety of ways. But remember, we're talking about one factor among many considerations, 9 different considerations that we look at relative to this.
Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if that fundamental gender identity claim does not exist, do any of the other 8 considerations matter at all when it comes to the potential to be transferred from a male facility to the facility at Shakopee?
Commissioner Snell.
Mr. Chair, I think, again, the views of safety as of one factor, but I want to also be clear that you would have to first identify as a trans person, a trans woman, in order to be considered for transfer to Shakopee.
Representative Hudson.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the back and forth. I think what we have established is that despite the many statements lifting to the surface a concern over safety, in point of fact, what we're talking about here is an affirmation of gender ideology. That's what this is entirely about. And I maybe this will land as a question. I don't know. I'm making it up as I go. But it occurs to me that the feelings of safety from the female incarcerated individuals at Shakopee do not carry the same weight as the feelings of safety from a trans-identifying male inmate in another facility. And when we talk about making sure that everyone's safe, that point's been made here many times tonight. The idea that we're here to protect everyone, which we are, certainly doesn't feel as though we're weighing everyone's feelings equally. It feels as though some people's feelings get weighed very much more heavily than others.
Democrats could very well re-up this extreme approach on Monday when the Preserving Girls Sports Act, HF 12, comes to the House floor. This bill simply states, quote, only students of the female sex may participate in an elementary or secondary school athletic team or sport that an educational institution has restricted on the basis of sex to women or girls, unquote. House Republicans seek safe and fair competition for girls. Polls confirm 80% of the public agrees with this position, 80%. In other words, if House Democrats do indeed align themselves with the radical activists by voting against HF 12, they will again be refusing to acknowledge that girls exist. What these issues reveal when we talk about the safety of girls and women, whether it's in sports or in prisons, is that people's feelings about safety are paramount. Exactly why we are concerned about safety is a dangerous question to ask Democrats because the answer is clear. There is a fundamental difference between a male and a female. That's a fact of life Democrats refuse to acknowledge. At its core, this is about Democrats gaslighting you into ignoring what you know to be true, denying the existence of girls and women all along. Good thing Minnesotans won't fall for it. The very same day, House Democrats blocked on the floor a bill, HF 14, to place a moratorium on new light rail lines in light of major cost overruns and project delays for existing projects. MnDOT and the Met Council announced the North Star rail line may be discontinued and replaced with bus service. The Star Tribune reported the main reason is ridership has fallen an astounding 98% from this already non-viable model during the pandemic as workers transition to remote work. We can transition to buses doing the same job as rail for 10% of the taxpayer cost. And here's the beautiful thing about buses: they can turn. You can actually alter the routes as needed in order to accommodate changes in your community. It's such a no-brainer, you really have to ask yourself why 66 all House Democrats voted against a moratorium on light rail. What good reason could they possibly have? Well, there isn't one. In fact, the only reason they offered was because it's somehow racist. Somehow, in their bizarre world, the Democrat argument is that not building a choo-choo train is racist. Don't ask me how to explain the logic, because there is none. Once again, this issue puts a highlighter to the difference in seriousness between parties. House Republicans are offering you a serious solution to a problem at 1/10 of the cost. Unserious House Democrats are calling you a racist for supporting that position. House Democrats this week also brought to the floor a bill, HF 21, which creates more stringent checks and balances regarding the governor's emergency powers. This would prevent history from repeating itself when Governor Walz declared himself the king of Minnesota for a year and a half during the pandemic. The way state law is currently written, a governor can continue extending emergency powers indefinitely so long as the legislature does not put a stop to it. The House Republican bill flips that on its head and says the governor can invoke an emergency, but a supermajority in each legislative body must approve extending them beyond 14 days. The powers also can be extended in 14-day increments, half the current 30-day extensions provided by the governor. This is a serious bill to address the harm that was done not by the pandemic, but by Walz's response. It wasn't the virus, it was government's response, which dragged out and ruined people's lives, destroyed people's businesses, caused an entire generation of kids to fall behind in the classroom, and more. Unfortunately, House Democrats once again took an unserious vote by blocking this bill on the House floor, leaving the door open to future tyrannical overreach at the expense of Minnesotans.